Poland, an unprecedented economic miracle. It will surpass Spain in GDP per capita. Poland is a country that went from being a communist state, one of the poorest in Europe, in the late 1980s, to having one of the fastest growing countries in the European Union and the best performing stock market in the world last year. How did it achieve this in just over 30 years? On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and the borders between West and East Germany were open for unification. The transition to independence of the countries that were part of the so-called Iron Curtain, dominated by the former Soviet Union, also began. Among them is Poland, which, along with Ukraine, is one of the largest countries of the former Soviet Union to gradually achieve its independence following the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. But do we have a clear idea of how Poland managed to go from being one of the poorest countries in Europe in the 1980s to being, today, one of the driving forces of economic growth for the entire former continent? Could the shock therapy applied by Milei in Argentina have a predecessor in Eastern Europe? Well, possibly so, and the name of the architect of this plan is not as famous as that of the president of the current World Cup champions, the little-known Leszek Balcerowicz. For Poland, the transition to democracy and the opening to capitalism was not easy. By early 1989, Warsaw's grocery stores had empty shelves, inflation had soared above 90%, and the population had to wait in lines for hours to buy basic products to feed themselves or get gasoline for their vehicles. Many of these everyday consumer goods were restricted, the country was bankrupt, and the population was experiencing widespread discontent. The average annual per capita income, or GDP per capita, of Poles was a mere $1,700, only a tenth of that of their West German neighbors, who had an income of about $16,000 a year, and still quite far from Spain, whose per capita GDP was $9,000 at that time. We're talking, of course, in the late 1980s. History changed substantially in just over 30 years, and Poland recently achieved an average per capita income close to half that of Germany, and increasingly close to that of Spain, with per capita GDP of over $23,000. Gross domestic product growth since 1990 was over 1,100%, the second best in Europe, surpassed only by Lithuania. Today, Poland is considered one of the driving forces of all of Europe, achieving annual growth of over 3% in recent years. But how did Poland achieve this transition in such a short time? The story is very interesting. As for many, the strategy used in Poland to emerge from communism and achieve what is considered an economic miracle bears close resemblance to Milei's plan implemented in Argentina. The Polish transformation began with one of the most important events in recent Polish history. Even before the fall of the Berlin Wall, the so-called Round Table Agreements had been signed on April 4, 1989. Poland achieved legal recognition for the Solidarity Trade Union, one of the political forces most opposed to communism, and opened the door to a process of democratic transition with parliamentary and presidential elections. On August 24, 1989, the first non-communist government since 1948 was elected, with Tadeusz Mazowiecki as president. For some analysts, the failure of the Polish economy in the past was not only due to Russian occupation, since World War II and the communist model that prevailed from 1945 to 1989. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Poland was ruled by an elite that held monopolies in food production and concentrated political power, leading to a tremendously unequal society and failing to achieve the development of trade and fledgling businesses that its European neighbors had achieved. Of course, after the war under Russian occupation, economic development was another failure, as between 1950 and 1989, average annual growth was close to 2%, insufficient for the country's development. Thus, by 1989, Poland began a transition at a significant disadvantage compared to its European neighbors. But despite the communist failure, some elements did contribute to the subsequent transformation, especially education. In the 1980s, even under Russian occupation, 70% of Polish youth attended school, compared to only 5% before the war. Additionally, nearly 15% of the population had access to university by the late 1980s. Although per capita income was among the lowest in Europe, it was a highly egalitarian society, with access to healthcare services and a high participation of women in the productive sector. This society, with a high level of education, largely supported the shift toward democracy and the free market economy that Poland transformed into starting in 1989. But in the first years of the transition, things did not go well, as Poland initially suffered a tremendous crisis with hyperinflation, a decline in industry, shortages of supplies, and deficits in state accounts. It was Leszek Balcerowicz, finance minister of the first democratically elected president, Tadeusz Mazowiecki, who designed his plan, known as the Balcerowicz Plan or shock therapy. Among the plan's first measures were freeing the prices of consumer products and seeking to balance the government budget to control hyperinflation. But the ambitious plan initially failed to achieve positive results, as the economy shrank by 18% between 1990 and 1991, with unemployment rising to over 12% and workers' wages declining. Due to inflation rising to 500% in the early 1990s, interest rates had to be raised and taxes on most transactions increased. The government set a goal of strict fiscal and monetary discipline to reduce the public deficit and the exorbitant debt. But monopolies were gradually eliminated and truly productive businesses were allowed to emerge, in addition to opening the economy to the world. Other measures included the deregulation of key sectors and a liberalization of most prices. Free currency convertibility was also allowed and capital flows were freed, integrating Poland into the global economy and radically opening it up to foreign investment. Shock therapy also led to the sudden closure of hundreds of industrial plants that were unprofitable or on the verge of bankruptcy, triggering a wave of layoffs. The adjustment was so radical that by the mid-1990s, more than 3,000 companies were experiencing financial problems, and many closed, especially those that were uncompetitive. The drop in real wages in 1990 was close to 25%. By 1991, the so-called state farms, which employed more than 400,000 people, were liquidated, sending entire communities into poverty. The adjustment also led to closure of some daycare centers, community kitchens, schools, and rail connections as the government pursued a strict austerity plan. The consequences were soon apparent, and it is estimated that in 1991, more than 300 protests took place due to the tremendous unemployment and the loss of workers' purchasing power. But the shock plan gradually began to show that it was working, and by 1991, hyperinflation had been controlled, public spending was reduced, and prices for basic goods were liberalized. This also helped control shortages and put an end to long lines for the purchase of basic consumer goods. The new system was built on the principles of the free market and non-state private ownership. The plan achieved its objective by attracting foreign direct investment, which provided working capital, technology, and knowledge from abroad, and also took advantage of the local labor force, which was well-trained and had lower labor costs than neighboring countries. Between 1995 and 1999, Poland already excelled, achieving the highest growth in all of Central Europe, thanks to the growth of the private sector. By 1999, GDP was 20% higher than in 1989, establishing a period of continuous growth. The macroeconomic stability of Balcerowicz's plan allowed him to successfully weather the Russian monetary crisis of 1998. But Balcerowicz's key role went further, and in 2000, he was appointed governor of the Central Bank of Poland. In 2007, he managed to reduce inflation to 2% per year. He also laid the foundation for Poland to achieve sustained economic growth for almost 30 years, at rates above 3% per year, a milestone few countries have achieved. It was even one of the few countries that did not fall into recession in 2008 due to the crisis caused by the bursting of a U.S. housing bubble due to subprime mortgages. Balcerowicz's fiscal discipline allowed Poland to reduce its external debt, allowing it to remain below 50% of GDP, enviable figures for countries like Spain and the United States, which have debts above 100% of their GDP, not to mention Japan, whose debt exceeds 200% of its gross domestic product. Achieving membership in the European Union in 2004 was also a milestone. Achieving membership in the European Union in 2004 was also crucial for Poland, as it allowed it to receive a large amount of investment resources that were used to modernize roads, railways, and telecommunications. In addition to improving infrastructure, millions of euros in European Union structural funds allowed for improvements in human and productive capital. Under these conditions, Poland was able to promote its exports, expanding its relations with the European Union. In 2000, exports accounted for 25% of its GDP, and in recent years have even exceeded 60%. For many years, companies established in Poland have taken advantage of their workers' low labor costs and well-trained staff to increase their production, boosting exports that will exceed $380 billion by 2024. Poland has established itself as one of the leading producers of high-quality wooden furniture, boasting an automotive industry that is a major manufacturer of parts for companies such as Fiat and Volkswagen, and has established a naval industry that is internationally recognized. Other sectors that have consolidated their position include the chemical industry, electronics, mining, and food and beverage, which increased its share of exports to 12%. One of the most successful sectors is the manufacturing of household appliances and electrical equipment. Polish industry has also recently grown in sectors such as information technology, with companies such as CD Projekt, the creators of video games like The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077, gaining ground. Software development and telecommunications services companies have also established themselves in the same sector, contributing $37.8 billion in exports last year, accounting for a 13% share. Infrastructure development has improved logistics chains and freight transport, consolidating the Port Gdansk as one of the most important ports in the Baltic Sea. Regarding roads, Poland has built a complete motorway network practically from scratch over the last 25 years, boosting exports for foreign companies located in the country and attracting more international investment. Airports have also been modernized, consolidating the Warsaw and Krakow airports as hubs for freight and passenger traffic. This economic success has led the economy to double in size over the last 2 decades, even reaching the top 20 economies in the world with a population of just over 36 million. Economic growth is expected to continue at 3.2% this year and 3.1% next year, among the best in all of Europe. Thanks to this tremendous growth, the Polish stock market has been the best performer in the world this year, far outperforming the American stock market and the S&P 500 index. It is estimated that by 2030, Poland will achieve a per capita income similar to that of Spain, Japan, and Italy, something that was unimaginable a few decades ago. Poland, like many European neighbors, faces a challenge: an aging population, which would severely limit its productivity and future growth. On the other hand, Poland faces challenges in trying to avoid dependence on fossil fuels like coal and transition to renewable energy, a process that can be costly and lengthy. But Poland is undoubtedly an example for many countries, demonstrating that while communism did not allow for real development, neither does society with imbalances, where the means of production are monopolized. Additionally, it demonstrates how quality education is a determining factor in achieving sustained development. Remember that in the video description, you'll find a link to the best course to learn technical and fundamental analysis for investing in stocks. There's also a link to the best platform for buying stocks on the stock exchange, regulated in the United States. If you liked the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the content.